I want to hear about Moscow Mitch. Moscow Mitch, that being Mitch McConnell of Moscow, Kentucky. Moscow Mitch blocks 2 bills. Moscow Mitch keeps killing any bill that would protect American democracy. But I want to talk about Moscow Mitch. Moscow Mitch, he is aiding and abetting Vladimir Putin's ongoing attempts to subvert American democracy. Moscow Mitch won't even let the Senate take a vote on it. Joe. That is un-American.
That, just this past Friday, left such a mark that it's now possible to say this. If indeed the U.S. Senate passes bipartisan legislation to protect and harden our defenses against the Russians, it may be thanks to former Florida Republican Congressman and current MSNBC Morning Joe host Joe Scarborough. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is not happy to be heading back to Kentucky with a new nickname, not this one. McConnell is running for his 7th term. Of course, he has to be reelected in Kentucky first if he wants to stay majority leader. Yet he has blocked the legislation that the critics say would stop the kind of interference Russia carried out in 2016, hence the Moscow Mitch nickname. It even got some airtime in last night's Democratic debate.
If Mitch McConnell is the one that lets him off the hook, we're going to be able to say, well, sure, they impeached him in the House, Castro, but his friend Mitch McConnell, Moscow Mitch, let him off the hook.
The New York Times reports Mitch McConnell is, quote, incensed by the name and even more miffed that he has been called a Russian asset. For once, Democrats seem to be getting to a man who has embraced his portrayal as Darth Vader and the Grim Reaper overseeing a Senate graveyard for legislation that he opposes. The Kentucky Democratic Party is now capitalizing on this dispute, selling items including, but not limited to, this T-shirt with the words, "Just say niet to Moscow Mitch." This week, the majority leader publicly defended himself against those who questioned his allegiance in a speech on the Senate floor.
I was called unpatriotic, un-American, and essentially treasonous. I was accused of aiding and abetting the very man I've singled out as an adversary and opposed for nearly 20 years, Vladimir Putin. Welcome to modern-day McCarthyism.
With us to talk about all of it tonight, Philip Bailey, political writer for the Louisville Courier-Journal, and Anita Kumar, White House correspondent and associate editor of Politico. Very glad to have you both. Philip, a special thanks for you for joining us from there. I don't know much, but I know the good people of Kentucky don't love Russia. With that in mind, how much has this nickname, in your view and in your reporting, Philip, taken hold?
Well, look, Senator Mitch McConnell loves a political fight. He brags about how he has 600 cartoons mocking him in his Senate office. When Don Blankenship, the failed West Virginia Senate candidate, referred to some cocaine being on a shipping port, he embraced that with Cocaine Mitch T-shirts. So he has a pretty tough skin. But the confidants of Senator McConnell that I've spoken with, former aides, current aides, all tell me this has gotten to him a little bit here. And that's because, Brian, other than perhaps his fight against campaign finance reform and free speech, what Senator McConnell holds really dear to him is his sort of pro-democratic views across the world, but also his hawkish views when it comes to the alliance between the United States and Europe against Russia. He actually believes in that. That's a key point of his philosophical standpoint. So I think this issue has, and this tagline of Moscow Mitch has gotten to Senator McConnell in a way that previous criticisms had not.
Anita, I want to read you something. This is from Greg Miller's book, The Apprentice, in which he describes a briefing that then CIA Director John Brennan gave to McConnell. This is about Russian interference before the 2016 election. As Brennan moved through his talking points, the Kentucky senator expressed no alarm about what Russia might be doing in the U.S. election and instead accused the CIA director of playing politics. You're trying to screw the Republican candidate, McConnell said. Anita, what could be a motive here of being the blocker between us, the American people, the integrity of our elections, and a piece of legislation designed to help that effort?
Well, people who have reported on this a little bit more have said that it could be a couple different things. And one of those things is that he doesn't want to get involved in state issues, state elections, that he never has wanted to do that. But as you've hinted there, others have speculated or talked to people who have said that perhaps he is seeing something here that he doesn't want to give Democrats the upper hand. That he sees somehow that the Democrats could be using this as more than an issue as we're talking about it, but could be, using it as an issue around the country. So, he's thinking of it as a partisan thing, perhaps. And doesn't want to get involved in that, doesn't want to do that. But as you have started to see just in the last day, he is starting to hint that perhaps they will take something up.
Philip, let's emphasize one more thing, his value to the president. He approved another 13 judges just before this recess. The count is up now to over 140. In some areas of the federal bench, President Trump has appointed a record number during his time in office. So that in mind, Philip, when Democrats dream about beating this guy in bright red Kentucky, what do you tell them?
Well, I would tell them that, look, Senator McConnell has been U.S. Senator since I was born. Right? I mean, those who put their money against Senator McConnell don't really work out. Senator McConnell has always been unpopular when you look at poll numbers, but as he's often told me, the only poll that matters is the one on Election Day. Amy McGrath, a retired Marine fighter pilot, certainly had some stumbles out of the race initially. Now you're seeing different Democrats, including State Representative Charles Booker, Kentucky farmer Mike Breuer, who's entered the race. Kentucky sports radio host Matt Jones is thinking about it. They're all sort of thinking about it. But at the end of the day, Senator McConnell has an argument that I think is very potent. When he's at these different meetings in Kentucky, Brian, not when he's at the national level, when he's in Kentucky, he'll often tell Kentuckians, look, when you look at the president and the 4 top leaders in Congress, all of them are from New York or California except me. So I'm not just representing Kentucky, I'm representing middle America. It's a different kind of rural identity politics that Senator McConnell plays quite effectively. So most of us here in Kentucky still have Mitch McConnell as the favorite. However, the Kentucky Democratic Party has noted they've raised about $135,000 off those T-shirts that you mentioned within 24 hours. And they're also seeing a lot of engagement from their party base here, which could be an early indicator of that importance of that race for Kentucky Democrats. So there's a lot of energy around the race. I think, if anything, McConnell may be worried about that being the early narrative, which may explain why he's already going up with radio attack ads against Amy McGrath and Senate Democrats.
Anita, Republicans just aren't going to like this. Tonight, I note Leningrad Lindsey has started up toward Senator Graham because of his performance in committee today. That will probably get under his skin back home in South Carolina. But Anita, and I don't mean to call for a judgment on your part, what about the calculus? What are the chances of what I laid out at the top of this segment being true? That this could, at the end of the day and at the end of the recess, actually result, because of the trouble this causes, actually result in the Senate taking up and finding 60 votes in favor of bipartisan election hardening legislation?
Well, as you just indicated, they've left for their recess. So a lot of it depends on what they're hearing back in the states, back home. I mean, you've mentioned Senator Graham. Depends on sort of the reception they get, what people are really talking about. So often we talk about things here that are here in Washington that they're not hearing back home. But if the Democrats are going to use this and it's resonating in their states, in their districts, I think that you might see that happen when they come back. And I think it really just depends on how the Democrats are going to look at this issue. Is this something they really want to push on? And what these Republicans think this will do for them next year? Will it really hurt them in their own elections? Both Senator McConnell and the rest of the elections that he's got to deal with. Obviously, we're talking about his own election, but remember, he's looking at all sorts of other elections around the country. So is President Trump. Those are things that they want to look at. And, the presidential election matters, Senator McConnell's election matter, but so do their fellow Republicans' elections. So I think it'll really depend on what we see over the next few weeks when they're at home.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.